What's going on, folks? Welcome into another episode of the Johnny's Report. I'm your host, Jay Hallahan, as we're back here on this cold December 6th evening, recapping the your number 23 St. John's Red Storm eking and capitalize eke out a very close 63-58 victory against the Ole Miss Rebels. A game that, to be honest with you, if you're a St. John's fan, I don't know how you should. I'm not going to tell you how to feel, but me personally, I feel pretty uneasy and unsure about where this team is right now. Because tonight's performance, offensively, down the stretch, throughout the game as a whole, aside from a majority of the first half and some of the second half where St. John's looked like they were going to run away with a big win, it ended up being a lot closer than it needed to be. And you can thank Zuby Ejiofor and his 15 points, 9 rebounds, and 8 blocks for the 5-point win. And Dylan Darling knocking down 5 of 6 free throws down the stretch to be able to win it for you, because the majority of this game was St. John's pretty much taking the win and trying to hand it to Ole Miss. The amount of scoring drought St. John's has gone on, I mean, I think they spent too much time watching Anthony Volpe play baseball in the summer, because they are such a streaky offensive team. They can get on some serious runs where they can score in transition. They can occasionally hit the open three, but they cannot, and I mean cannot, make a bucket to save their lives in some of these games. We saw it against Iowa State. Well, first we saw it against Alabama, where they had a lead late, a pretty decent lead late, and then it just completely withered away because in the half court, St. John struggled. And then against Iowa State, the same thing. Against Auburn, for pretty much most of that second half, they won on a long scoring drought. And then tonight, I mean, I think I counted at least 2 times, I want to say 3, where they went on a significantly long scoring drought. I mean, early on, they had that 2.5-minute drought where both teams just couldn't buy a bucket. But then to end the first half, after Ian Jackson made a layup to put them up 15, they went on a 4-minute long scoring drought where they didn't even get to the free throw line and hit a free throw. And it's bad enough if you can't make a field goal in a long drought. What does it say when you can't even get to the free throw line and knock down a free one? As St. John's would see a 15-point lead wither away to 8. And if you were watching on Peacock like I was, you heard Rick Pitino say that he thought that they were going to come out and they were going to play better in the second half. And to be honest with you, the first probably 10 minutes, that was true. I mean, they looked good. They were getting stops. They were making layups. They went inside to Zuby a couple times, and he was able to wreak havoc. And Sadiku made a 3 to put them up 14. And then once again, St. John's goes on a long snooze. They go on a long scoring drought. Ole Miss cuts it down to 4. Then St. John's puts it back up to 8. But then with 4 minutes left to go, St. John's, doesn't score again until the 109 portion left to go in the game, when Dylan Darling would make a free throw to put them up 5. It's just so much bad basketball in your half-court offense. I can't believe it. I mean, I really cannot believe a Rick Pitino coach team plays this badly in the half court. I thought we left those half-court woes where you can't even be a decent half-court offense in the previous administration. But it's like we saw the same thing happen tonight, and the turnovers down the stretch. My Lord. I mean, thankfully, Ole Miss also had 20 turnovers in the game. But St. John's in the second half, they turned it over, if I can get the exact number, 12 times. 12 times. And then the one where the ball blasts off, I think it was Darling's head, and it's a turnover for Ole Miss the other way. I mean, it is just so unbelievably head-scratching. It's not even funny. I mean, like, are you kidding me? And at a certain point, you start to hit the oh no panic button because, and I couldn't believe it when I found this out earlier in the week, but Ole Miss, and I double checked tonight to make sure I didn't dream it. They're 124 in the net. In the net. This was a team that I know they were in the top 50 in KenPom to start the year. I don't know specifically where they were. I think they were in that 30, 40 range. Thought they were going to come into the year and be a decent team. But, if St. John's is playing like this against a team that is that badly ranked in the net, what are they going to do against Kentucky? What are they going to do when it comes to Big East play? And you got to go up against the UConns of the conference. I mean, wow. This was thank God they won the game. I don't want to sound disingenuous or not thankful that they won, because obviously if they lost, it would have been, of course, a worse scenario. But to see how this team is playing right now, the best they've looked is against Baylor. And they looked good against Baylor. They wiped away a rough loss the night before against Iowa State, who just blew out the number one team in the country today, Purdue. So we know what St. John's can look like when they're at their best. But we also know that you can't be messing around here in the non-con, and especially when we're in early December. We've had a month now. I thought tonight defensively, St. John's looked really good. I thought at the very least we could hang our hat on. They had 13 steals. They looked tremendous in the first half defensively, and they finished with 20 points off turnovers, which is great, which was this team's identity last year. But again, I would have liked to have seen this team come together a little bit more in their half-court offense, not have sloppy mistakes. And you can, as John Fanta said at the end of the game, you can put the excuse, okay, they haven't played in 9 days. And I get that. But I'm not going to wait until their next game to sit here and say, this is not the way St. John's should be playing up to its standard. This is not the standard St. John's has set for itself. I'm not even just talking about last year. I'm talking about the end of the 24 season, where they set a standard of they were going to play at their best in those final couple games of that season. And sure, sloppy games will happen. And I know Ole Miss is an SEC team. But you were predicted to be number 5 in the country. You have all this talent. A 5-point win against Ole Miss, and to play like that like they did tonight, isn't getting it done. It is not getting it done. And I know fans, don't want to hear it, but it's the truth. One player in double figures for the game scoring, Zuby Ejiofor, which is great. Hey, Zuby had a great night. Good. 15 points. 3 of 8 from the field. He was 9 of 11 from the charity stripe. 9 boards, as I mentioned. 8 blocks, which I think was, I don't mean to undersell it, but a tremendous night defensively from Zuby. Thank God he can defend in the paint as well as he can. But in terms of their half-court offense and in terms of taking care of the basketball, St. John's is not doing that at the moment. And when I look at this St. John's team in terms of their backcourt, Listen, Dylan Darling's a scrapper. We know that. Dylan Darling, he is going to give you 110%. But his offense is limited. I would solely and highly consider just having him as your main ball handler up the floor. Because I think he may give them the best opportunity. I thought Ian Jackson looked better tonight. Thought he looked better. Still streaky, but in 19 minutes, he gave you 7 points. He was unfortunately 2 of 11 from the field. He was 1 of 6 from beyond. Had some good looks. I'll give him this. I thought their shots tonight, they were 4 of 22, but there were a couple that was like, all right, you got a good look. Looked like, they were able to create. They were just unable to hit. But eventually you got to hit them. I mean, that was the issue last year, and we can't just wipe it away by saying, hey, they got some decent looks. Because that's what we did last year, and then look what happened. They were one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the country. Can't happen again. We cannot rely solely, again, on this team to be so good defensively, because as we know, that's only going to take you so far. So the case for St. John's all offseason and up until this point has been, how much better have they gotten from beyond? And they haven't. I don't know if there's a quick fix for that, but they're going to have to find it because, look, we're seeing right now there aren't going to be too many opportunity for quality wins potentially coming up in this conference's play. I'm looking at the back half of this non-con schedule. You face Iona. You got Kentucky, and obviously the Kentucky game is the one that everyone's eyeing down. Watching Kentucky and how they played against Gonzaga, the fact that they lost to Gonzaga by how much they did, and then they lost to UNC, tells me that, yeah, Kentucky's vulnerable. Tells me a lot of things about Kentucky, which I won't really get into at the moment, but it tells me a lot about Kentucky. But that game and this game against Ole Miss, because as I mentioned, Ole Miss being 124 in the net, you have to be able to win out in your non-con. Not and Iona and Harvard, you absolutely need to win out in your non-con. But there is no doubt in my mind that if they beat Kentucky, or if they lose to Kentucky, I should say, that would stick out like a sore thumb. Because again, the Cats look pretty rough this year. I mean, they're getting booed. I don't know when the next time they're back at Rupp, but that's going to be a unpleasant experience, I'm sure, for Mark Pope, who's an alum. Who knows how long they're going to be willing to stick it out with him, because I'm sure the Cats Nation, Big Blue Nation, is livid up to the moon with the way they've been playing this year and how much money they spent. St. John's is also pretty livid with where St. John's is right now with all the talent they have as well. But going back to what I mentioned about the backcourt, Ian Jackson, Dylan Darling, Joe Sansanin, Oziah Sellers, your 4 big ones. Why is it that it feels like for all these guys, they cannot create off the bounce? And Joe San specifically, I mean, ever notice he's more so just standing around. I mean, it's like, come on. Can we at least get him an open look in the mid-range? Can he create an open look for himself? Can he drive with the basketball? And I noticed the same thing with Bryce Hopkins as well, who obviously is not in your backcourt, but on the wing. He had so many mismatches, and especially where he had one inside there in the waning moments on the far block from the TV angle. Why are you not going up with the basketball trying to get aggressive inside? At worst, you get fouled and you go to the line. I mean, are you kidding me? Is this the guy that was Mr. Big East a couple years ago? Is this the guy that was so dominant in games throughout this season so far. I just don't get it. I really do not understand where they are expecting to get the offense from. And it was said on the broadcast a couple of times, you just got to get aggressive for yourself. I mean, at a certain point, I would have liked to have seen Zuby just gone inside and said, "Screw this! I'm just going to take the game over." And if they collapsed on him, either A, he gets fouled, or B, I have enough confidence in the fact that he'll be able to pass out of it, or at least he should know, hey, I'll be able to pass out of this to an open shooter on the outside. But again, we saw this last year. We saw them just stay in this, and to be honest with you, I think this was probably the worst St. John's has looked in about 2 years in a game. I would argue this was like the game where the viral clip of Patino afterwards against Seton Hall. This was barring that kind of play where you get a big lead and then we're just watching them time and time again go down the court. Other team gets a stop, back down the other way, and they're able to hurt you inside or able to hurt you outside. Fortunately, that wasn't the case tonight, but it just felt the same exact way. The amount of scoring droughts, unbelievable. Unbelievable for, again, a St. John's team that, as I mentioned before, we kind of thought we left this sloppy play a few years ago in the previous administration. And I'm not trying to blame Coach Patino or anything like that. I'm just saying it kind of makes you wonder, well, you got all the talent. Eventually, the talent has to be able to mesh. Eventually, these guys themselves, instead of just looking around for someone to make a play happen, go make the play. Zuby had 15 points, but go make the play. Bryce Hopkins, for as much as he did in his career, I should have enough confidence in him to be able to get you a tough basket. Same with Joe Sansanone, with what he did at Arizona State. Knock down an open shot, drive to the basket. I mean, come on. And one guy I want to highlight as well, as I mentioned about Zuby, I thought Dylan Mitchell defensively, I mean, if you notice, he had 3 steals tonight. He had 7 rebounds, 3 offensive. He had that big putback dunk. If you notice, there were times where Ole Miss, whoever Mitchell was on, if he was going to try and attack him, they weren't getting very far. Dylan Mitchell, to me, and it shows because he was also 1 of 4 from the free throw line. He looks like this year's version of Kadari, which Kadari Richmond could do everything for the team except knock down free throws and hit 3-point shots. Great defender. I think St. John's, one of my biggest concerns was how much were we going to lose defensively? And to see Dylan Mitchell, a guy whom, is long like Kadari, has that kind of potential, though he's not, I'm not asking him to bring the ball up offensively, but defensively, he reminds me so much of him that thankfully Dylan Mitchell signed on for St. John's, and thank God he turned in a really good performance tonight as well. But my goodness, folks, I mean, this team had you wanting to pull your hair out in this one. Hence why I'm wearing a hat. But just a brutal, ugly win for St. John, 63-58. And at the end of the day, they won the game. But you cannot tell me you're going to perform like this and be able to make any kind of noise in March. But forget about that right now. In a year where the Big East is looking like it's a 2 or 3 bid league, you cannot tell me this is going to be sustainable. It's not. They've got to show improvement. They have to improve as this year goes on. They have to learn from these games. And it's an SEC opponent, Chris Beard, whom adjusted well in game. which the big thing that Ole Miss just simply needed to adjust was just being able to get the ball past half court and not stupidly turn it over. Although that just went right out of their minds and into St. John's, as we saw. But it is a Chris Beard coach team. You did play well against Iowa State, and you lose by 1. You lose close against, well, I shouldn't say close, but you lost against Auburn. You had a lead. So if you want to take that with home with you, I guess you can. You managed to beat Baylor, who just lost to Memphis today, and I don't know how much that one's going to stick out. And you had a lead late against Alabama. There are a lot of things they need to tighten up, but almost is not going to get you top seeds in the tournament. Almost is not going to get you wins. And for St. John's, that's what they're in the business of. They're in the business of getting those quality wins. And right now, as we can see, they haven't gotten that marquee statement win this year. I can't envision. There's going to be enough opportunities for Kentucky to do so. But if St. John's can beat Kentucky and Kentucky gets on a run in SEC play, somehow, some way, Ole Miss gets out of being in the triple digits in the net rankings and they can get some quality wins in SEC play, maybe you look back on this and say, hey, those were 2 decent wins. One maybe borderlining a quad 1 win. Same thing with Baylor, who, again, just lost to Memphis today. If they can get their act together, maybe that can borderline a quad 1 win. But for St. John's, boy, oh boy. I mean, you can't just hang your hat on, well, we got all this talent. We've got all this talent. You can have all the talent you want. It's got to mesh. Go ask Scott Drew that question about his team last year. He'll tell you the same thing. Ask Mark Pope that at Kentucky when we see him in 2 weeks. He'll tell you the same thing. It's got to get better. And believe me, I'm sure that with Rick Pitino, they are hearing it. Dylan Darling said tonight, he was interviewed after the game. Hopefully they'll have a much better performance their next game at MSG. And they have to. They really have to. Conference play is just around the corner. St. John's in 10 days will be taking on DePaul. But their next game will be against Rick Pitino's former team, the Iona Gales. And, I mean, I'm sure that Iona is going to be bringing all kinds of ammunition from a fan standpoint for that game. As you can imagine, that's going to be next week. That'll be at MSG. So we'll see with a noon tip-off what St. John's looks like. And hopefully it's going to be a lot better than what they showed this evening. But all right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Johnny's Report. We'll be back on throughout the week to talk about what's coming up for St. John's, to discuss game recaps next week, of course. Again, St. John's taking on Iona. So stick around for that. Of course, subscribe to Big East Energy Network. Give us a follow, and as well on the Johnny's Report socials as well. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, we'll talk to you next time.